On Thanksgiving Day, we saw if a babbling old fool could complete all of Guilty Gear 1 with only yelling. Today we try a challenge using his wartime rival and arch nemesis, the original Gear herself, Justice. The Gear that is so very famous for blowing Japan out of existence. So what if we decide that every person we encounter should also be blown out of existence? And what if we had an attack conveniently called Nuclear Bomb? Well, join me today as we ask the question, can you beat Guilty Gear X2 with only nuclear bombs? The rules are simple. We have to beat the entirety of Justice's story mode with only, the nuclear bomb move, and none other. I will be save stating before every match, so that if I accidentally use any other move, I immediately reset the round. With all that out of the way, let's see if Justice can nuke humanity out of existence. First, let's discuss what the nuclear bomb move does. It is a move in which Justice fires a slow-moving projectile that detonates either when you let go of your button prompt or it hits a target. The move can be fired in 4 different configurations: a low shot, a high shot, a narrow arc that goes up and then back down, and finally a wide arc that again goes up and then back down. Notably, on hit, the move has a good chance of landing a knockdown, and multiple can be shot at the same time, presuming you can actually hold down the buttons. The main weakness of this move is that it is a somewhat slow-moving projectile and somewhat slow to come out, and because it's such a slow-moving projectile, a competent player, or AI, has plenty of time to take advantage and take evasive maneuvers. So will it be enough to beat the game? Let's hop into our first match against
Versus Testament.
Narratively speaking, Justice had just been revived, and is therefore in a very weakened state, meaning as we square off against our own minion, we are starting off in pretty rough shape. What you'll notice here is that my technique isn't nearly as defined or refined, as you'll come to see later in the video, as I attempt to fire one projectile at a time and hope it keeps Testament at bay. What's also worth noting here is that Justice's relative lack of mobility in this game, meaning that if I'm pressured or being cornered, I am basically helpless. I'm going to get trapped like a rat, as my opponents will always be able to outpace my pathetic attempts to flee. However, in this match, Testament is still just the first opponent, and therefore he is just as useless as I am, and inevitably he does go down. Incidentally, for your sake, I'll be keeping track of my deaths with his handy death counter above. With our servant defeated, is now on to
Versus Bike.
For this Japanese swordswoman, I decided for what I like to call the mortar strategy. Effectively, by going for the low nuke and then a wide arc nuke, the idea is that to use both to push the enemy back, but ideally prevent them from being able to take to the air and close the distance. And as you can see against Baiken, it mostly works. There is a moment where the swordswoman manages to close the distance and managed to tether me briefly, but given she failed to capitalize on my poor mobility, it's only a matter of time before she joins the rest of Japan in nuclear annihilation.
Versus Axel Low.
Now, if you remember my first video, you may remember Axel was literally useless in preventing my victory over him. And here it's much the same as we begin to see my modern strategy take shape. This time I mostly abandon the wide arc nuke shot and just go for lows and highs back to back to leave less of a gap in my nuclear defenses and ideally keep Axel away from me. And this is crucial as given he is a zoner, he does pose a threat. And he does even manage to land an attack from mid-range and even close distance very briefly. As I'm forced into the corner like a rat in an effort to escape, Axel decides to shoot himself in the foot as, whilst I'm constantly failing my inputs, he decides to just stand there and do nothing. And once I get back into my groove, the brainless Brit decides jumping right into a nuke was a good idea. As you can see, it wasn't.
Versus Chip Zana.
Well, that didn't go well. Unlike Axel in my original run, Chip Zana was an actual threat, and here he is no different, delivering me my first death of the run. So what about Chip makes him so dangerous? He simply has everything you would want to counter my strategy. He is an avid jumper, he has ranged attacks, and can bypass my nuclear bomb, and if all else fails, he can teleport behind me where I am vulnerable, and with my slow maneuverability, I can end up scrambling to respond, and you've actually seen me fail my inputs again very briefly. Of course, none hitting him. However, once I recover my wits and begin spamming in desperation, the Naruto reject runs right into my blast, finishing himself off for me.
Versus Melia Rage.
I'm just gonna let the entire clip play so you can see how effective one of the top assassins in the world is against Nuclear Armageddon.
Perfect.
Well, with that, we move on to...
Versus May.
Okay, you really have to see this fight. The fight starts off well with May deciding that standing in place and jumping in place were brilliant ideas, and even threw herself directly into the path of an oncoming nuke. The thing is, she manages to actually break through and hit me, forces me into the corner where she then breaks through again, getting behind me, and instead of capitalizing, she decides the best move she could possibly do would be to fly clear across the screen away from me so I could just kill her with ease. Folks, you really just can't make this stuff up.
Versus
If it wasn't obvious, I have a bit of a long and unfortunate history with Potemkin. Then you can imagine I was absolutely terrified of what would happen if this big lug managed to corner me. But that apprehension soon turned to delight as I realized that it's nearly impossible to miss an opponent this large with my widespread nuclear damage, and I figured I was walking toward another perfect victory, only for him to literally hit me exactly one time to rob me of my perfect victory before going down. God, I hate Potemkin.
Versus Old Man.
Ah, the character I used in my last Guilty Gear challenge run. Will he be a mortal enemy or just another rug to step on? But whilst I didn't lose, he put up the biggest fight so far as he managed to break through my volley not once, but twice and more by coming from above, and even had me backing up across the stage at one point. And in spite of managing to even get more damage a third time, I fear that when it came to a battle of attrition between the God of Destruction and a feeble old man, Cliff simply couldn't go the distance and perished. His successor, though...
Versus Kai Keese.
Oh boy, if you sat there and thought my range attacks were bad, I want you to look at the beginning of this fight, as Kai's Thunder Spear literally does damn near half my HP. And just like the original challenge run, Kai Keese proves to be one of the hardest battles of the run, managing to add to my death counter for the first time in 5 fights. So what makes Kai difficult? Well, he pretty much has the ability of Chip, allowing him to quickly hop to either side of me with consummate ease where he can prey on my brief period of vulnerability. Couple that with his insane damage and the fact that his range attacks can overpower my nuclear bombs, and you have a recipe for a disaster. I mean, look how his range attack just ignores my nuke. So, how do I actually manage to defeat Keisuke? Well, I bring the mortar strategy back into play. Along with both the high and low nukes, we bring the wide arc nukes from above to catch Kai slipping and reduce his ability to close in. Make no mistake, he occasionally resorts to his own range attacks that briefly stun me and still go through my volley, but by the end, he actually manages to break through and nearly puts the beat down on me. And with all the pressure I put on him, he finally goes down.
Versus Soul Bad Guy.
Well, now that we got past Kai, surely we can't possibly die again. Okay, now we're not only at 3 deaths, but we've confronted the biggest villain on this channel, Soul Bad Guy. In the original run, he was responsible for ending that run altogether by stonewalling our yelling boomer. So what's his deal here? Well, unlike the original Guilty Gear, he is our final boss, and as such, if you look closely, he's actually regenerating health. I mean, if we want to trade equally in this fight, I am sure to lose. But what about keeping him at range? Well, as you can see, his aerial mobility is nothing like I have seen before, and he constantly gets in my face, and I basically have no choice but to be cornered like a rat for the entire run. Coupled with being the most aggressive opponent we've faced, and despite my best efforts, I do go down. If you watch the intro to the fight, you'll also notice that we start off this fight at reduced HP, meaning I have even less room to make mistakes against this sword-wielding maniac. On the winning run, Soul manages to get in some cheeky damage on me by using his insane movement to quickly close the distance before jumping back. And whilst normally bombing him would render swift results, his tendency to block, combined with his regeneration, meant that as the clock began to wind down, it was becoming apparent that this was going to come down to a battle of attrition. With only 10 seconds on the clock, Soul seemed to get desperate to secure a win and made one last desperate stand against my defenses in a bid to get that little bit of damage to carry him over the finish line. But I was able to beat him back just enough to shockingly win the round and the run with a timeout victory. And so, with the achievement to prove it, whilst Justice does die in the canon ending, we at least prove that you can beat Guilty Gear X2 Accent Core Plus R with only nuclear bombs. And that is going to be it for this video. If this is an idea for a third Guilty Gear video you'd like to see in this challenge run series, please let me know down in the comments below. And like and share if you enjoyed, but until then, be safe, be wise, and please pray for a true peace in space.